Hello, everyone. This is the Ecohouse Podcast. Sydney, would you like to take it away?
Hi. We hear the term global warming thrown around a lot in politics, the classroom, even over family dinner. But what does it mean? Why is it important, and how does it affect me?
Thank you, Sydney. So, our first topic is global warming tends to imply that the Earth is only heating up, but it is much more than just that.
So one of the main points that people make about global warming and why it is such a big issue is because of the various natural disasters that are caused by it. Whether it be wildfires or floods, they're super detrimental to like every community, and even just rising water levels are making entire islands like places like Fiji and New Zealand starting to sink, and eventually they will fade out of existence if we don't do something to stop this. So that's like part of the reason why global warming isn't just oh no, it's getting hotter outside. Global warming is more of an issue because it's actually causing people to lose their farms, lose their property, lose their lives, get displaced, and overall just it is not beneficial at all towards humanity, and it needs to be stopped. There needs to be something or some sort of countermeasure to it.
Yeah, I think the same thing too, exactly. It's kind of crazy how, global warming tends to impact certain kinds of people, people who are not by the coast, people who tend to have more money, that tends to typically impact people who are in less developed countries.
This is definitely especially a huge problem in Southeast Asia where the Southeast Asia is where if you put a small highlight on it, that would be about a third of the world's population right there, all in one very tiny area, and it's all in a very low lying land. So what you're seeing is actually one of the largest cities on Earth. Jakarta is kind of being abandoned by the I think it's Indonesian government, and they're moving the capital because the entire city is going to be underwater within the next century, probably way sooner. And you're also going to see this. This isn't just across the world. This is also here in America. The Miami is kind of gone. If you'll notice, insurance companies aren't giving out home insurance to lots of homes in Miami, especially in low-lying areas, and also just in the general Florida, southern Florida region. And you're also going to see this. It's not just in the American South. Eventually, rising sea levels will kind of impact everyone, unless I guess you live in Montana. But
well, you also have to think about the wildlife too. It's not just affecting humans. There's more and more species of animals that are going extinct or even endangered. What is it? There's only less than 100 polar bears left. And
yeah,
they're
that's crazy.
It's crazy because you're oh, polar bears, they live in the Arctic, and now it's
where's the Arctic?
It doesn't exist anymore.
It's more where's the polar bears? There's this famous photo going around of this one polar bear who's clinging to the last tiny piece of ice, where it's thinner than any polar bear should ever be. They're supposed to be the biggest and most powerful bears, and this bear was a bag of bones.
Polar bears can I think it's they can swim for 2 days straight, and this is something that is recently discovered because they haven't had polar bears swimming for 2 days straight in the wild. They've had them because what polar bears do, they hunt on the ice, and then they break they find little holes in the ice and eat the seals or the fish or whatever comes out from there. But if there's no ice, there's no place for seals to rest and no place for the polar bears to go, and now it's all these animals. And this is not just polar bears. It's all different animals from all around the world. What was it the Willow Project was going to cause
Oh, more drilling of oil.
Yeah, and it was going to cause a bunch of animals to be become endangered.
Yeah.
I believe that was in the Alaska.
Yeah, I thought it was Alaska.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, that was something. I'm pretty sure Joe Biden.
I didn't look too deep into it, but I know that it was something oh, if this happens, it puts thousands of species endangered instead of and it's a big deal.
It really is a big deal. So it's crazy, things just something as simple as heating up the Earth has a ton of. It's a snowball effect. Ice caps melt. I forget what the term is. I think it starts with an A, where it's since there's less ice, the ice is reflecting less sunlight, which causes
it to be hot again. Oh my god! It's like a something cycle where it keeps repeating itself.
Albedo.
Well, yeah, that. Yeah, it's a positive feedback loop.
Yep.
So it'll keep doing that. More habitat will just continue to be lost just by the simple action of heating the Earth. Animals' entire habitats are gonna, be destroyed. But going back to Indonesia, how the capital is being moved, that's crazy.
Yes,
When was
that's
this
insane.
like talked about? Do you know, James?
I'm actually not entirely sure about that.
That's
Well, it makes sense because isn't
yeah.
Indonesia just like a bunch of like islands?
yeah, it's a bunch of islands.
Like
So-
it goes like that.
Yeah, the same thing goes to just like a ton of other island countries, island nations, or just like coastal nations.
Oh yeah, there's actually entire sovereign nations that are like at risk of no longer existing. There's a lot of nations to the north east of Australia that are probably not going to be member states of the UN for much longer because their entire land, if the ocean rises like 5 feet, it's kind of gone like completely. And you see a lot of them. Their populations are rapidly decreasing because everyone realizes that if they have a kid, like they're not going to be citizens of any nation pretty soon. And a lot of cities are doing is cities and countries is that they're creating like huge flood protection infrastructure projects. But this is kind of just like putting a Band-Aid on an arm that's cut off. It's not going to do anything, and it's kind of just delays the inevitable a few years. Most of these flood protection systems are kind of rapidly failing. I remember I think Venice had this like multi-billion-dollar project, and they spent like so many years building this huge flood protection system because the entire city's sinking, but within 2 years it was rendered irrelevant and kind of it's kind of entirely pointless. So it's kind of looking to be what the fate is going to be like for basically anything like that's by the coast unless it's on a mountain or something.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of these changes aren't reversible. Like it's like we can either stop it, but we can't go
We
back.
can't even stop it. We can just slow it down.
Well, yeah, we can slow it down. It's like not we can't like put a dead stop on it. But
And that's the biggest
yeah.
problem, though, is because people are looking at what affects me right now, so they're not looking at what
Yeah.
scientists and other experts have like estimated in like the following, like not even another century, like in a couple of like decades
Yeah.
of what's gonna happen. People aren't focusing on the then because we're all focusing on the now. Like you're talking about the flood protection and stuff. That's not gonna do anything because they're just focusing on one small area with one city, one place, trying to just like prevent the inevitable from them.
Yeah.
When we should be focusing on how to like impact and change like on a global scale, slow down.
Yeah, especially like specifically like people like us who don't necessarily see the daily effects of climate change. Like we're not seeing all our cities be flooded that were here like 2 years ago because we don't live on the coast and we don't live like in Miami.
And the people who can have plausible deniability are the ones
Yeah.
who aren't directly
Yeah,
affected
exactly.
and are most likely the ones who are in power just saying, oh no, this isn't affecting me right now, it can't possibly be real.
And with like today's modern society, it's so like hard to avoid unsustainable companies.
Yeah.
Like if you look at it, like even something like plastic, which is like polluting everything, and like the production of it is just really bad. Basically, it's almost impossible to avoid in daily life.
And when offered simple solutions to it, because of the way that the companies are and how they have always been going through, like for what will give the most profit, there has been solutions like to especially like plastic production of like alternatives that we can be used, but they're never going to be implemented on a global scale
Yeah.
because of the companies already in power.
Yeah, it's something insane. Like 6 big companies run like
Exactly.
everything in America. Like specifically, it's like 6 big companies run everything, and they're gonna buy out all these sustainable companies.
to
And
make
it's
sure that
why-
they can stay.
And like entrepreneurship is so hard as it is. If you're trying to build like a sustainable company, it's becoming more and more popular. Like as time goes on. Like you see this like more sustainable clothing brands coming out. Like you have like Shein and Temu and like all that, which I
Are
have
sustainable?
bought. No, I'm saying like they're not sustainable.
Okay.
No, I'm saying that those places are coming out as they're like fast fashion and all their stuff is going to landfills. But then you have like the small businesses coming out. Like I got something recently where it was like a small woman lesbian owned business, and they're like, please buy from us. We have sustainable clothes, and everyone was like, it seems like a scam, which is like another big thing.
Yeah. Another issue with that is just the fact that small businesses tend to have to drive their prices up just to stay in business. Yeah, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah. So, like, I try to purchase from, like, zero waste companies. Like, I do, like, shampoo bars and stuff like that. And it's so, like, much more expensive as, like, a one-time purchase. Like, if you look at it over time, like, I have one of those reusable, like, razors. It cost me, like, $42 to get. But I haven't bought, like, a plastic razor in, like, 3 years.
Oh, do you mean like a safety razor?
Yeah, like that. Like one of those, like, reusable ones where, yeah. I don't know what to call it. But it's, like, looking at the initial price, you're like, $42. Like,
yeah, that
I don't
drives
really
a
want
lot
to do
of people
it.
away.
But if you look at it, like, over time, it's really, like, not that more expensive. If you're looking at going out and buying plastic razors, it costs you $10 every time you gotta buy one. And you're buying one, like, I don't know, like, once every 2 to 3 months. And you're like, it adds up over time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look, like, I saw someone do, like, an in-depth analysis she did completely zero waste laundry. So she does, like, laundry sheets and, like, zero waste, like, scent boosters, just, like, everything's zero waste. Like, there's no plastic, and it's, like, all carbon neutral. And it cost her, I think, on average, $50 less annually to do
crazy.
zero waste laundry than to do it, like, with the traditional, like, plastic items.
Yeah, it's crazy how just like a lot of sustainable practices tend to just be cheaper in the long run. But I think the major issue with doing those is the fact that it's not readily accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
Considering the fact that a lot of the stuff that we use now are produced by, the same companies. Those are what's readily available to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So these more sustainable alternatives that some of these people can use, they just can't use it.
And it's also like a lot of sustainable businesses are online. And we're so used to Amazon with like 2-day shipping that it takes longer to get them and you have to pay for shipping.
Yeah.
In which people are like, they're kind of like turned away from it for that reason. Because there's also like the big deal of greenwashing where the people are selling like bamboo utensils but they're sold in plastic bags and people are like, well, that's not really sustainable if you have to like purchase trash to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a really good segue to a topic of greenwashing.
Yeah.
So essentially, just like a quick definition of what greenwashing is when companies present themselves as way more sustainable, way more carbon neutral than they actually are. They're saying they have these goals that they are not going to fulfill. What do you guys know about that? What do you guys think about that?
So yeah, piggybacking off of your point, Marin, greenwashing is like something that I've kind of realized is a big problem, especially as of recent, just because as people specifically more towards like Gen Z and millennial sort of type have become more aware and more like forward towards climate change. Brands and companies that advertise markets or advertise like products towards their market, towards their like demographic, they'll try to appear as if they are more sustainable than others, but really, as Marin said, all they're doing is trying to save money, and that's where like the real issue comes in, because if we actually had some sort of process, maybe enforced by the government or something, that would actually dictate how much a company can actually pollute the environment, then people wouldn't be greenwashing, and instead people would be actually telling the truth about how much they are or how much better they are than other companies, which would be much, much better towards like both just in general, like with like capitalism being a big issue and consumerism. I feel like at least that'd be a big step towards putting society, or at least putting climate change in the right direction.
So that is actually like a really great point. One of the big reasons why just we as a society aren't super sustainable is just because of rampant consumerism, It's because like we as a society just happen to be really, really dependent on these kinds of, infrastructures.
Yeah, and going off of that, talking to mainly what started that, which was the 1950s, 1960s, you start to see following World War II, more consumerism, an increase in economy. You start seeing a rise in single-use or single-owner vehicles. We started having a federal interstate highway, and our entire infrastructure of cities, especially in America, but because we were the blueprint, other cities across the world are also beginning to take on this sort of car-centric idea of what a city should look like, and which isn't necessarily sustainable by any means. And with that comes more innovations on that are even less sustainable, where you have things like taxis or specifically on-demand mobility like Uber or Lyft, which their entire jobs is just to pollute the atmosphere. And it creates a new demand for backseat rides and adds to congestion. And in fact, congestion in the transportation infrastructure costs or wastes roughly $160 billion every year. So it's not only not sustainable, it's not good for the economy as well. And because of this, there is more cars on the road, the commutes take longer with more vehicles, and transportation is going to end up costing more. And what you're seeing now is more and more cities like Singapore, for instance, who are actually building their city from scratch over water, try to take a more green way to move into the next generation, using different infrastructure, making it people first, having a way in which it's mainly pedestrian, mainly biking. You see it in Copenhagen, in Denmark as well, or Sweden.
Yeah, that's actually really good points. So, we're going to move on to our next topic, which happens to be about farming.
One good point that Amber made that I wanted to touch upon more is pollution. Researchers have recently found that livestock industry, especially beef, uses dwindling supplies of fresh water, destroys forests, and causes soil erosion, and leads to even more pollution into the environment. I wanted to talk about factory farming, which I believe is a really big issue, not only in the United States, but globally. 99% of the farms in the United States are factory farms. These factory farms emit methane and nitrous oxide, which are up to 300 times more damaging as greenhouse gases compared to carbon dioxide. These factory farms also account for more than 37% of greenhouse gas and methane emissions, which is 20 times the global warming potential of CO2. Not only to mention the detrimental effect it has on the environment, but also how factory farming is unimaginably inhumane and cruel towards the animals. Billions of animals each year are not only tortured by being in small and confined spaces, but also pumped full of steroids, left injured and untreated, and they have to endure terrible and unsanitary conditions and inhumane amounts of stress before they are cruelly slaughtered. These animals are subjected to mutilations. They have to live in terrible, terrible living conditions where they are jam-packed with one another, sitting in their own feces and urine, and can't even lie down comfortably in most cases. They are being deprived of their quality of life, and it's just incredibly inhumane, and I think we need to do something to fix this.
Yeah, if you look at the number of farms in the U.S., the number of farms has been decreasing by half, but the number of animals, like, in the U.S. on those farms has been, like, doubling.
And you might want to ask yourself as well, like, how did we even allow this to happen? When you look at something specific like concentrated farms like CAFOs, I think is what we're really thinking of, which are concentrated animal feeding operations. Unfortunately, what happens is in order for these type of conditions to be allowed, they tend to place these CAFOs, place these really confined, horrible conditions for animals type farms in places that is low poverty. It costs less to own land there, and they just continue to pollute it. Think of the manure, the wildly increased manure that gets emitted from there. Think of the noise pollution as well that comes into it. And just even the smell is so bad sometimes that not only is it polluting the outside residents, their waters, their what they use to shower and what they use to breathe, it's also continuing this level of environmental injustice that goes on in our society, specifically in America.
Which really sucks, because there are sustainable farms, and we could make, like, the meat industry sustainable, but it just costs more money.
And the biggest issue is not over the fact of, like, costs, it's just the issue of what and who runs these things. Because there are, like, I'm pretty sure it's, like, 3 main corporations that are in charge of the beef production, and beef and meat, I think both, but I know for a fact, like, the beef production is, like, run by 3 big, like, powerful corporations, and there's not much you can really do, especially if it's, like, small, local farms advocating for, better raised and, more humane conditions.
Those small local farms are housing their animals in good conditions. They're having them, like, specifically beef cows, like, on pasture for, like, their entire life, and then they wait until they reach, like, maturity naturally before, like, slaughtering them for meat. So I know my family personally, we go to, like, a local farm where we know the cows are pasture fed, and I happen to just live in a town where there's, like, 3 beef farms, like, on my way to school that are all sustainable.
So it's accessible to you.
So it's accessible to me, which is great for me, but a lot of people can't do that, too. Where it's, like you said, like, the low-poverty towns where they can't, number one, afford the locally grown stuff, or, like, it's just not accessible to them.
Okay, we talked a lot about what's wrong and what's awful and terrible, but I feel like we should probably discuss about some of the things we can do to, like, combat this. Like, we talked about how we're not going to be able to ever, like, stop, but we can slow it down and help Earth kind of regain its natural cycles. Like, anybody have any ideas about, like, what good ideas there are to, like, start pushing for change?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just, like, naming some things off the top of my head would be to, remove fossil fuels being, like, the dominant, source of energy. Considering just the fact that the amount of energy that it produces compared to how much you need, compared to how much waste it causes, it is incredibly low on if you were to, like, list all the, possible ways to generate energy. It is really low on that scale. There's stuff that is way higher. If you were to take, like, nuclear power, for example, even though it's not necessarily sustainable, the energy per weight in uranium is way more than that of, like, coal or oil or any sort of fossil fuels. And on top of that, the amount of waste that it produces is the uranium itself. So all you need to do is store that uranium for a long period of time, which personally I believe that being able to store that uranium is way better than having carbon emissions in the atmosphere, having excessively warmed, and destroyed habitats, destroyed animal species, stuff like that. What else do you guys think?
I agree with you entirely. It also would help with the fact that we were talking about the plan for the drillings in, what was it? Alaska. And with nuclear fusion, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't need to, destroy any habitats.
Yeah.
So that's another big thing.
It would require mining, to be sure.
Yeah. But on a much, it's not, like, a much, like, smaller scale than would be for, like, any oil drilling.
Probably. I would imagine it would be so. And the, the effects of doing so wouldn't be as bad as drilling for...
Which, of course, it wouldn't be, like, an all-time solution, but it's definitely a very, like, plausible step away from carbon emission and fossil fuels.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just purchasing more sustainable, like, investing your money in more sustainable businesses, because you can't control what everyone in the world does.
Yeah.
Never are we going to get everyone in the world to recycle. But you can recycle and you can purchase sustainable items which will benefit your carbon footprint. Because if you look at it like the Taylor Swift jet, she's never going to off-put that carbon footprint. But we can off-put our carbon footprint, and then we can do a little more for the next person. And eventually, like, you vote with your dollar. And you can purchase sustainable alternatives than big name.
One way that I was recently looking into was this idea of weatherizing, where instead of using excessive, like, fuel and power to heat and cool your home, we build it in a way that which it utilizes the sun at its highest points at time and channels the, like, sunlight into your home to warm it when needed, and the insulation is built in a way that will keep you warm in winter and cool off in the summer. It's just, like, the idea of, like, more care into our architecture. Like, there's also, like, green roofs, which utilize the space, especially in cities. I think it's really important for green roofs, because that also not only does it help promote, like, more trees, more clean air, and especially in cities that need it, but also it stops runoff. It's from, like, the roots in the trees, and, like, any sort of, like, green roof will help keep the water there and used instead of pouring down the sides of buildings and breaking and cracking the pavement.
Yeah, because there's like places in the United States where tap water, you cannot drink the tap water.
Yeah.
Because it's just so polluted.
I love your point on green roofs, and I do believe that cities are very important if we want to talk about sustainable living, because basically 55% of the entire population lives in cities right now. And there are, I believe, at least 10 to 15 megacities, which house over 10 million residents. And that number's just going to keep going up. I believe the projection is by 2050 is going to be 70% of our population are going to be in cities. And that type of urban sprawl means that we need to find sustainable infrastructure fast for those cities. Ideas like LEED buildings, I know we have a bunch on campus, bioretention wells, which will take in water and will grow some sort of plant as well. There's rainfall gardens, green roofs, as you have mentioned. We just need some place to increase infiltration into the groundwater, especially in places like cities where there is so much impervious cover. There's so much concrete where typically cars drive. Taking a bit of that back for nature is extremely important if we're talking about groundwater and poor runoff.
Yeah.
Just to add to the point about cities, I just want to mention that people living in cities, it's actually it's a very good thing for the environment, because when you live in a denser populated area, more densely populated area, you emit significantly less than someone who lives in a suburban area or even a rural area, because it's basically using the same amount of land space and all that comes with that. So like maintaining roads, maintaining services, and having enough commercial, retail, and as well as employment opportunities to meet a certain area. That all stacks, so it uses a significantly less amount of space, energy, and resources to support a much larger population. So it is a very good thing that the majority of the world's population is growing up in cities. Now it's just about making those cities more sustainable, more like the cities that in Western Europe, and less like Dallas, Texas.
So just really quick, I wanted to know if you guys heard about this city proposed by former Walmart CEO Mark Lord named Telosa. Have you guys heard anything about this?
I've heard absolutely nothing about what you're talking
So
about.
this city is a proposed sustainable city. It's going to be put into the middle of the desert. Essentially what this guy is trying to do, this guy Mark Lord, he's trying to get land and he's trying to get funding for this city. It's supposed to be, it looks really futuristic. It has it's all green. There's roofs with the green roofs. There's all of that. But when you look into it, it's really, really sketch. So the first thing I noticed when I was looking at this was that they didn't even have a proposed place to put it in. And this guy is asking for money for this city. So he was like, yeah, it could be in Arizona, it could be in Montana, and then he has some other places.
Does he have a climate that he's thinking of? You said desert originally.
Yeah, what's gonna...
are they thinking desert? Because there's a reason why there's not a lot of
right?
cities and deserts.
I think that this guy thinks that he would have the ability to terraform a desert into an oasis, because that's what the images look like. The images of this proposed city.
Okay, have you looked at it far enough to know where their main water source is gonna be from, and
See, no, because that would depend on wherever they end up being.
Oh, because they didn't even decide where they're building it.
They don't even have that strong of a proposal. Where if they don't even know where it's gonna be, how can you make a plan?
Exactly.
I feel like it's one of those things where it's the meme where it's the world when, and it's just some super utopia. It's something funny where it's the world if everyone recycled, and then it's some super utopia, but they're memes or something. You guys know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I feel like this guy had an epiphany one day, maybe like after like a hot shower or something,
He's like, I'm
and
gonna
then
change
had
the world.
no other plan and just like kind of started saying things.
Yeah.
He made it a shower thought, a Twitter tweet. And then
That
he
is
was
exactly that is probably what this is. This guy
Yeah.
probably had like a few 100,000 to throw some like digital like media designer to like make a website for. I'm gonna quickly read something from this. There's a website for this, the Tolosa website. There's an FAQ. So Tolosa will be built in the United States. We have established site selection criteria, engaged experts, and plan to begin conversations with local, state, and federal leaders to help identify the ideal location.
So site
Wait,
selection
okay,
criteria.
they're talking with local people to find the ideal location.
To
Do we
build
kind
it,
of
yeah.
how that's a problem there? Like they don't have the local people because
Exactly.
they don't have the location.
They're like,
Right?
we're looking for site selection. It's like they don't even know what they're looking for yet.
They don't know what they're looking
site
for.
selection criteria, a
Some-
place that will have them.
Some potential locations include Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Arizona, Texas, Appalachian region.
Those are all very
Okay,
different.
that's
Yeah, those are
super
very
Those
different.
are really awful ideas. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the same problem with like Las Vegas. Like they built a desert, like a city in the desert, and now they're running out of water. Like
Yeah.
do you not
Exactly.
think
Like
the same
that,
thing's
it's
gonna happen?
it would be the exact same issue if they were to build it by the Appalachian like mountains.
Yeah.
Like Los Angeles or Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. Also Los Angeles.
Yeah, both
too,
of them
but-
actually. They have like a mountain range behind it,
Mm.
and then that like prevents like ocean winds to like prevent it
yeah.
from cooling down and like
the rain cloud effect, I think.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the FAQ is the goal to create a utopia? No. We're absolutely not attempting
Isn't that like exactly
to
what he's
create a
described?
utopia.
Isn't that
Why
like
will
exactly what he described though? He's like
Yeah,
describing
right.
a utopia, and then he's like, "Are you trying to make a utopia?" And he's
No.
like,
No, not at all. That's not what
It
it's
sounds like a
supposed to be.
plot of a really bad short story we had to read in 8th grade.
Yeah, it's like a creative writing prompt. That's
Yeah.
what this feels like.
I feel
Oh
like
my god, yeah.
I feel like we need more people with power and influence to do something that aren't stupid.
Right?
You know?
But the thing is,
They're
all
so
stupid.
they're so disconnected from
Yeah.
like reality
Mhm.
that they're like what was it that Jeff Bezos did something like crazy recently, and people were like, "That's not what a normal person does."
When does Jeff Bezos ever not say something
Yeah,
crazy?
bro
He
has-
wanted to
bro has
dismantle a
went to-
historical bridge in like what
Yeah,
was it
and
like?
people were like,
What did he
"Dude,
name
this
his
is,
son
like-
or something? Was
like,
that him?
that was Elon Musk.
That was Elon Musk.
That
Never
was
mind.
Elon
Another rich. Oh.
Sydney.
And I don't think how they, or like they aren't thinking about how this is actually gonna impact like the area or like the habitats or the animals living in this area. Like even in the desert, there's still keystone species in the habitat that would would like go extinct.
Yeah, they're like so disconnected from reality that they don't understand that this is not what a normal person thinks.
I will say Caitlin brought up a really great point. If you look at a place like Nevada, which is one of the places that they're suggesting putting it in, isn't it over like 90% of Nevada taken by like the U.S. natural resources as like national park area, like almost the entirety of it, and I don't think anyone's going to
Like a lot of the United States is protected.
We gotta think about like how big this is gonna be, and then like we have
Where do we
lands
have enough
protected
space?
for animals. We have native lands that we should
Yeah.
still have to be protected that people often forget about, and the animals too. Like especially like if we're talking about the Appalachian Mountains. Like first of all, mountains not really very like forgiving climate. Like they're gonna. I don't understand this guy's vision here. Going from the desert to the mountains is a very very drastic jump. And the animal species and the people who live in the mountains, like that's a very, very like woodsy and like terror like formed like area. Like it's
Yeah,
not gonna
not
be
to mention it's like just geographical location. What are they gonna
Yeah.
do? Level a mountain?
exactly,
for,
and
like, a
that's not gonna be sustainable.
Have
Yeah,
you seen
no.
those like memes where it's like someone went to Arizona and they saw like a big thing and it's like, guys, this isn't good enough. We need a Walmart and a McDonald's.
That's
right
literally
here.
this
exactly.
guy.
That's like the time like real estate people try to like destroy Yellowstone to put like houses and stuff.
Oh my goodness.
I feel like it's just like another millionaire who
He's just bored.
He's like, I'm bored. I want to do something.
Clearly didn't do any research, because if you look at any of the big cities, most of them are in or around water, and for the most part, the idea of a sustainable city and what has been researched on is that the best approach to it is to actually build on water, not even beside it, but on top of it, if not a few feet even above it. Like I was mentioning earlier, Singapore, which is built on water, because not only does it give you an entirely new space to work with, it also provides it also provides protection over sea level rise and creates an environment that doesn't need to worry necessarily about soil infiltration issues and destroying any type of wildlife, because it's just reclaiming.
He's just gonna make his own lake. He's gonna go like on top of Lake Superior. He's gonna move Lake Superior into like, Nevada.
He just heard Amber's idea. Was like, I need to make my own lake.
He was like, on water, but on land first.
Dude, he's gonna like, I could make my own lake in desert. And
it's like the first time like two synapses like had like a spark between them.
Brain cells have collided. They know what they're thinking now.
He's gonna empty the Pacific Ocean and just put it in Nevada.
What if we take that and move it over there?
He's just gonna move it somewhere else.
He's just gonna buy a bunch of water bottles and open them one at a time.
And take the plastic and just...
That'll be our landfill.
Alright. Well, of course, one podcast is not enough to cover the extent of which our daily lives and future are impacted by climate change. It might not be an issue of imminent danger right here, right now, but changes are happening and it's important to do something before it's too late. So do your part, research, spread the word, and the prospect of saving our home becomes just that more obtainable. We only have one Earth, so let's do our part and save it.